A third important element is that cultures are integrated, coherent system. Culture is more than a random assortment of customs. It is an organized system of value, attitudes, belief, and behavioral meanings related to each other, to a cultural group's physically environment, and to other cultural groups. To understand a particular facet of a culture, it is necessary to understand the cultural context. Well, for example, most US citizens have difficulty identifying with the marital practice of polygamy. A number of contextual factors support the general lack of comfort with this practice in US culture. First, it is illegal. Second, it is inconsistent with the traditions of the predominant US religions. Third, it is counterproductive in a cash economy, which having more partners means a need for more money to support them and their children. However, for the Kikuyu of East Africa, polygamy is a viable marital alternative. Kikuyu society is based on subsistence agriculture, and more wives and children enhance the economic well-being of the household because household and particularly the number of male kinds people in one social unit. More worship, larger families means a bigger religious following. Therefore, not only are cultural beliefs about polygamy not viewed as immortal Kikuyu society, they fit other aspects of the Kikuyu cultural context. So, we will watch a video related to culture of Kikuyu society. It describes how they live and what is their culture. So, please watch that video.
From folklores to song, traditional musical instruments to weapons, to customs and traditions, this is a quest into the cultures and traditions of the beautiful tribes of Kenya. This is Culture Quest documentary series. What does Mount Kenya, a bird and a tree, have to do with the creation story of the Agikoyo tribe? In this episode, we explore the story of the Gikuyu tribe, their beliefs, rituals, customs, and songs that define the Gikuyu people. This is Culture Quest, the Agikoyo documentary. The Agikoyo tribe, commonly referred to as the Kikuyus in Kenya, are a Bantu-speaking community that is mostly known to be farmers. The Gikuyu creation story starts in Mount Kenya, where the first Gikuyu man was created by God, known as Mwene Nyaga in pure original Kikuyu language, also as Ngai in current Kikuyu language. God would then command Gikuyu to establish his home at Mukurwe wa Nyagadanga. This can be compared to the Garden of Eden for the Kikuyu.
Ngai opa Gikuyu amwitire mundu. Na hĩndĩ acokire kuona mundu atũrĩte atarĩ mũkenu, nĩ amũmbire mũmũteithia, akĩmwĩta o mũndũ. Matũra mũno Gĩkũyũ akĩona mũhiki ũcio nĩ mũthaka, akĩmwĩra niĩ rĩ, ndakũrora ũguo rĩ, nyonaga ũrĩ mũthaka, ũthaka waku nĩ ũnyũmbaga ndĩgwĩtaga mũmbi akĩmwĩta rĩtwa rĩu
nĩ wega ĩ nĩ gũtũhingũrĩra mũrango
The Kikuyu dowry process is interesting, not just in the steps involved, but also in that there are two criteria involved in determining how the dowry negotiation is to be commenced between the father of the boy and the father of the girl.
mumĩte kũ mumĩte gũkũ kũ ndũĩ ngari ĩtarĩ namba nĩ ya mũici
The visitors then offered the father of the girl the traditional beer, Njohi Jorio, to ask for the girl's hand in marriage. To drink the beer, the father asks permission from the girl. This point is critical, because if the girl does not consent, the negotiation is cancelled, meaning the intended marriage is off. If the girl gives consent, it is symbolic that she is willing to be married to the party, for in Kikuyu customs, the girl chooses her partner willingly.
Okay, let's see. At the most general level, a working definition that is useful in considering the effects of culture on global management practice is that culture is a set of knowledge structures consisting on systems of value, norms, attitudes, beliefs, and behavioral meanings that are shared by members of a social group and embedded in its institution and that are learned from previous generation. Average levels of the values that our society's members express are often good indicators of social cultural characteristics. While society's cultural characteristics are generally well known among its members, some cultural values, attitudes, and beliefs will be accepted more widely than will others. Culture is most directly about behavioral meanings or social norms and only indirectly about patterns of behavior or personally held values. Consistent with working definition of culture, Sharon describes three levels of culture, which is divided by artifacts and creation values and basic assumption. Look at this figure. This figure depicts the relationship among these three levels of culture, which can be likened to an iceberg with only a small percentage being visible above the surface of the water. This figure shows that above the surface are cultural artifacts which include all the visible features of a culture, such as the architecture of its physical environment, language, technology, clothing, manners, dress, and so on. Just below the surface are the exposed values of the culture. These values are consciously held in the sense that they are explanation of the observable features of culture. Deep below surface are the underlying assumptions shared by the culture, which are the ultimate source of values and action. These basic ways of structuring reactions to the world shape beliefs, perceptions, thoughts, and feelings at unconscious level and are taken for granted by members of a cultural group. Because they are unconscious and taken for granted, the effects of culture are often not apparent to a society's members and are therefore often overlooked by global managers. Armed with a working definition of culture as a set of knowledge structures shared in a society, it is now possible to examine elements of the environmental context that give rise to and reinforce cultural difference. It is not possible to evaluate all possible contributors to cultural variation. However, some anthropologists have derived a set of assumptions about how cultures interact with the environment, which related to how societies confront and solve the common problems of existence in a functional way. So, the first assumption is that there are a limited number of common human problems for which all peoples at all times must find solutions. There are a limited number of alternatives for dealing with these problems. So next one is all alternatives are present in a society at all times, but some are preferred over others. And the other one is each society has a dominant profile or value orientation, but also has numerous variation or alternative profile. And next one is in both the dominant profile and the variations. There is a rank order preference for alternatives. The last one is as society is undergoing change, the ordering of preferences may not be clear. Based on these assumptions, elements of culture evolve to provide different solutions to common environmental contexts will always result in similar cultural characteristics. For example, while developing methods of producing warm clothing is more useful to cultural groups in semi-Arctic climates than in tropical climates. Groups in the chillier parts of the world have developed many alternative kinds of warm clothing and ways of producing it. However, understanding something about how cultures emerge, are maintained, and are changed can help international which they are working are likely to react to globalizing technological, social, and economic conditions. May cultural characteristics originally developed to aid the survival of groups in their environment. For example, people in many Western cultures shake hands with their right hands as a form of greeting. Initially, it was probably an indication that no weapon was being held or about to be drawn with the dominant right hand. So I give you another example. The Maori of New Zealand have an elaborating challenge ceremony or which is now reserved for greeting the dignitaries. This ceremony involved sending forth warrior who challenged the visiting party by pressing about the brandishing fighting weapons, followed by presenting a token on the ground to their leader. Originally, this challenge was to determine the intentions of a visitor. If they come in peace, the leader will pick up the token and the warriors will lead the visitors onto the mare. Having determined the intent of a visitor, there was no need in this culture to display an empty right hand as a form of friendly greeting. As sign of peace, the Maori greeting among individuals is pressed noses or hug like this. People in different climates seem to have different attitudes toward Chan. So, the lack of urgency often observed in tropical climates might have originally reflected the lack of seasonality in agriculture. Because crops can be grown year-round, they do not need to be planted and harvested at certain times. Consequently, such societies tend to be developed little regard for deadline. Ways of dealing with social problems such as determining the friendly or hostile intent of visitors come to be built into a society's institution. Institutions are the structures and activities that provide stability to a society. So they consist of the family, education, economies, religions, and political systems. Institutions that support a society's cultural orientation typically include some governmenting group that rewards desired behavior and punish unacceptable behavior, as well as organizations that teach and promote desired behaviors. Children learn the concepts that are reflected in their societies institutions in terms of beliefs about right or wrong, good or bad, ugly or beautiful, and so on. Cultural concepts that have their foundation in ancient beliefs about survival and that has become fundamental beliefs about right and wrong in a society are likely programmed at a very deep unconsciousness level in its members. Their meaning might not be apparent to the outsider and can even be occurred to members of the cultural group. And evolutionary theorists have demonstrated the importance of so-called initial conditions on the persistence of patterns of thinking over time. Once a cultural pattern is established, it is very resistant to change, even when surrounding circumstances change. And next one is language. Language plays a particularly prominent role in the way cultural characteristics have spread throughout the world and how they are maintained within a society. One long-standing view is that because people encode things in memory in terms of a particular language, language defines the way they view the world. Language determines the range of possibilities that a society provides its members to mentally represent their environment. Although language is influenced by the environment and reflects the concern of society, linguists disagree about the degree of control that language exerts over people. For example, the Inuit language of the indigenous people of the northern part of North America contains numerous words describing snow. Apparently, the existence of many more terms for snow does not necessarily indicate the ability to distinguish types of snow any better than with fewer terms. Some argue that language does not constrain thought. For example, when do not have a word for something significant but one. Recent research suggests that some features of language are related to how people view the world. For example, speakers of languages based on pictorial representation tend to see the world more holistically than do speakers of language based on phonetic scripts. Even the way we think about time may be influenced by language. So, for example, English speakers mainly think of time horizontally as behind followed by ahead, whereas Mandarin speakers think of time vertically as followed by down. So, language is an artifact of culture that helps to perpetuate its values, attitudes, beliefs, and behavioral routines. The fierce protection of the French language by Francophone Canadians illustrates the recognition of the power effect that language has in perpetuating culture. Because we use language to interact with others, it has powerful toll in shaping behavior and in perpetuating beliefs and habitual patterns of interaction. So next one is religions and ideology. Religions and ideologies reflect beliefs and behaviors shared by groups of people that cannot be verified by scientific tests. Religious traditions are closely related to cultural value. They then have a cultural influence through the content of their belief system. For example, the content of specific teachings of many religious traditions promote a strong work ethic, not just among their adherents, but also throughout the societies where the religious group have been especially influential. Reliance on authoritative texts or on a succession of authoritative leaders can influence a society's structure, even when the content of the teaching change. For example, the reliance on written texts as a base on authority has contributed to the written language unity and emphasis on education of Chinese societies, even as authority has changed from Confucian teaching to Maoist teaching to more electing source of value. Religion groups have long competed with states as a base for social identities that shape with whom people are most willing to work, trade, or fight. to some extent, a social appeal to select a major religion or form of a major religion that fits well with its long traditions and that attempts to create a government to protect its heritage and religions.